In this landscape of worldwide coverage and information that we encounter in our lifetime, it cannot be expressed in the form of security or insecurity. For some, we feel safe when the authorities watch our every move, but for others, it's a complete different story. While in the past they could not rely on this form of security, they had to try single-handedly to form an opinion in a crime without actually evidence and tracking down the criminal of such one. This is the story of Ann Gotlib. In 1983, a 12-year-old Ann Gotlib was the only child of Natalie and Lyudmila Gotlib and lived with them in Louisville, Kentucky. Ann originally hailed from the Soviet Union, but 3 years earlier, her family had immigrated to the United States of America. On June 1st, Ann spent the afternoon playing tennis at the city's Jewish Community Center before she went to visit another friend named Tanya Okmiansk. At around 5:30 p.m., Ann's mother phoned the residence asking her to return home for dinner, so Ann and Tanya rode their bicycles to the parking lot of the Bashford Manor Mall, located across the street from Ann's apartment. The two friends went their separate ways, but Ann never returned home, prompting Lyudmila to go searching for her after 6 p.m. When she visited the place of disappearance, she came across Ann's bicycle, which was now propped up against a brick pillar outside Baker's department store at the mall. The bike kickstand was down, even though it was broken and Ann never used it. It seemed that someone else has placed it there. After Ann was reported missing, a massive search effort was launched. 3 days later, a police dog seemed to pick up Ann's scent around the drainage ditch near the mall, and the dog led the police towards an open window at a nearby apartment complex. The apartment belonged to Esther Okmiansky, the grandma of Ann's friend, Tanya, but Esther maintained that Ann had not visited her apartment at all. While this seemed like an odd coincidence, the Okmiansky family was cleared of any involvement in Ann's disappearance, and the blood hunt likely led police to Esther's apartment because she was cooking food at the time and the dog may have been distracted by the smell through the open window. In another strange coincidence, a sex offender named Ralph Barry Barber was arrested for attempting to abduct another young girl at the Jewish Community Center on the afternoon of June 1st. Barber fled the scene when the girl's mother intervened, but this incident took place around the same time Ann had been playing tennis there. But when Barber was tracked down, it turned out he had a clear justifiable argument, as he traveled to Lexington later that afternoon and multiple witnesses placed him at a traffic stop between 5:30 and 6 p.m. In June 2008, 2 days after memorial was held to commemorate the 25th anniversary of Ann's disappearance, a woman named Virginia Bailey came forward to incriminate her former boyfriend, Gregory Louis Oakley Jr. At the time Ann went missing, the couple had been living together in Louisville, but Oakley had a prior history on sexual offenses with young girls in Alabama, including an incident from 1981 in which he drugged his 13-year-old stepdaughter with Demerol and sexually assaulted her. While he only received a sentence of 2 years probation for the crime, Oakley lost his vet's license and moved to Louisville to get a job as a meat inspector. In September 1983, Oakley entered the home of a 13-year-old girl named Leigh Mooney and attempted to sexually assault her, but she fought back and Oakley fled the scene where Leigh told him her father was a police officer. After Leigh identified Oakley as her attacker 4 months later, he was arrested and charged with attempted rape and burglary, and investigators started looking at him as a possible suspect in Ann Gotlib's disappearance. Oakley failed the polygraph and the ATM records showed that he made a transaction at the bank near the Bashford Mall, only about 100 minutes before Ann went missing. However, Oakley maintained that he left Louisville on a business trip right after the ATM transaction, and no evidence linked him to the crime. Oakley received a 30-year prison sentence for the attack on Leigh Mooney, but by 2002, he had developed a terminal lung cancer. In June of that year, the parole board granted Oakley a medical pardon and released him from prison before he died 4 months later.
It was 28 years ago today that Ann Gotlib disappeared.
Despite police naming a suspect, her family says the case should not be closed. WLKY's Aaron Haynes joins us now with how friends and family mark the anniversary. Aaron?
Parents would think of
Thanks, Aaron. Ann Gotlib's last parents pledged to create a national center for missing and disability children. On their website today, you can see Ann's picture and a computer-generated photo.
According to Virginia Bailey, Oakley had actually left Louisville on a work-related trip on May 31 of 1983, but to her surprise returned home at around 11 p.m. on June 1st, which contradicted his original story. This would have been between 5 and 6 hours after Ann went missing, and Bailey said that Oakley appeared to be drunk and asked her to wash the clothes he was wearing, which had traces of blood on them. Since Oakley worked as a meat inspector in the slaughterhouse, it was not uncommon for him to come home with blood on his clothing. But this was the first time he had ever demanded that Bailey wash them. This new story from Bailey compelled investigators to re-interview a burglar named Charles Cavan, who has served time in prison with Oakley and claimed that he once made a confession to Ann's murder in 1989. Oakley allegedly told Cavans that he abducted Ann and injected her with a painkiller drug, Talvin. However, before Oakley could sexually assault her, Ann wound up having a negative reaction to the drug and vomiting, so he strangled her to death in a fit of rage and disposed of their body by wrapping it in a tarp and burying her. In December 2008, police publicly named Oakley as a prime suspect in Ann's disappearance and stated that even without Ann's body, they felt the evidence against Oakley would have been strong enough to charge him with murder if he was still alive. Sadly, Ann's body has still never been found, and since Oakley is currently deceased, we still don't know with 100% certainty if he was responsible for what happened to her. Hello. Since this video took a long time to create, I want a favor from the viewers. Share this video with people who you think will be interested in these type of topics so we can elevate together. If you like my content, you can suggest a topic of yours and I will make sure to put it on the next video. However, if you didn't like something in the video, comment down below with constructive criticism and I promise I will do better.